In this tutorial, we're going to look at the Live Paint tool in Illustrator. And what I've done here, I just found a beautiful line work online. Don't know who it belongs to, but either way, the idea is that you have some line work, but you don't have any fills on it. And the thing is that if you created your line work already with fills in mind, you would already made a bunch of closed shapes. But the situation is sometimes, like I've done down here on this work we're going to look at later, I just made a bunch of lines. Some are connected, yes, some are shapes, but some are not shapes, they're just line work. And you might come across that situation. I just want to start with this one, because what I could do here is, right now there is no fill whatsoever. We can see that. I brought it onto the workspace, and I can see that the gray, there's no fill at all. And so I can't select the fill, but if I do select a space, it selects the whole thing. Now if I ungroup it and just select this space, it's still, once again, it's all random. It's not completed shapes put together. So what I have to do, I'm going to select an area first in order to use the Live Paint bucket. Now the Live Paint bucket is under the Shape Builder tool, and if you don't have all your tools shown, you go to Window, Toolbars, and Advanced, and then you'll see all your tools here. So under the Shape Builder tool, I'm going to go to the Live Paint bucket. Now the Live Paint bucket will not work if nothing is selected. See, it has the cursor there, it has the stroke through it saying it's not going to work. So I have to select something first in order for the paint bucket to work. I select the paint bucket, and now keep in mind there's also a Live Paint selection tool I'll show you in a second. The Live Paint bucket is great. What I can do, I can click on a color. I'm going to click on these set colors I already had for myself here. And now it could show, I could scroll through the swatches with my arrow tools, my left and right arrow tools on the keyboard. Look at that. Not only does it show up on the cursor, but it also shows on the swatch panel where I'm about to go. So if I go backwards with my arrows, well, that kind of went off a little bit, and there I go, okay? So I can go back and forth through these, or just through my cursor and do the same thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to select random colors. It doesn't have to be obviously correct or real, it doesn't matter. So what I'm just going to apply this area with the color, and there it is. And now as I hover over other areas, what appears is a selection in a thick red stroke, because that's the color of my layer, red, and I'd just be able to color again. And if I want to go to another color, I press that, press an arrow left or right, or choose from the swatch panel and just select and select and keep on selecting. Now what actually happened here was the stroke is black, but the person who did this expanded the stroke, and now the stroke is a fill, which is great. So I could actually color the stroke as well, which I'm not going to do because it does throw off this drawing a little bit. Not a big deal. So once again, I'm just going to cycle through, and I'm just going to choose different colors here, whatever, doesn't matter, just to show you that. So I can select certain areas, and I could apply a color automatically using the Live Paint bucket. Now another way to do this is using the Live Paint selection tool. I can now hover over an area and select it first, and I can see it selected. It looks kind of like the process has all these tiny little dots. I know that that area is selected. I can just choose a color, and it changes to that color. I can choose another area. I know that area is selected. I could just go to my swatch panel and choose another color. Not a big deal. Really, really good. I could obviously go to the color panel as well. If I want to play around with a certain color, there it is. There's my color. Okay, and I could add that color obviously to the swatch panel. So that's just showing you some line art that was made without any closed shapes, well, a few closed shapes, but not really that's intention. And I can go into my Live Paint bucket and paint those areas. Now here I've made a drawing as well, and I could do the same thing. Now once again, this was not made with shape in mind. Obviously there are some shapes, some closed shapes, but mainly it's just a bunch of lines put together, but these areas are closed. As you can see, there's no open areas. I'm going to show you that issue later. So I'm going to select the whole thing first. And what I can do is I can go to my Live Paint bucket. Once again, same idea. I made a little bit of a group here for myself. I'm just going to start painting the hair. Maybe I have different colors in mind for certain things. I can always go back and do this 100 times. It does not matter. Okay, and I'm just coloring in the areas. Well, now let me try the Live Paint selection tool and select an area. Say, okay, that's the face. This is the shirt. Whatever I want it to be, okay? And then it just paints those areas. So as I hover over, it says that's the area. No, you want to paint this area, not a problem. And then I can change the color, whatever I want it to be. Okay, now that's how that works, and this is the full coloring of that idea, but just really quickly placed together, and I can always go back in and change things if I need to. Now the next thing I want to show you realistically is when you are preparing that artwork that you've made. Now I did this all with the pen tool in Illustrator. You might have other ways of doing it, but for me this is what I've done. Now I'm just going to grab the brush tool real quick, and just to show you the issues you might have. So I have this situation here, and I've kind of done something like this, okay? Let's just pretend. Now, what I want to do, I want to use the live paint bucket. I'm going to click on the live paint bucket, and I'm going to start coloring in a shape. I'm going to color here. Yeah, that's fine. Complex visual appearances, attributes such as brushes, might be lost. Converting the live paint group, not a problem. Thank you very much, but it fills in very good. Now what I can do, I'm going to choose another color and I'm going to fill this area. But watch what happens when I try to use another color and try to fill this area in. Look, the cursor says no. Cursor says no. Cursor says no. The Illustrator has to recognize the area as a closed-in area or a shape, something that where the path is closed. So if I go back to this artwork, take on the pen tool, say, okay, I'm going to continue from here to here. Okay, now Illustrator can understand that these are closed areas now. So selecting that again, I can click on the paint bucket. I'll go to another color and I'll click and I will click. Okay, so once again, no, because it's not a closed in path or closed in shape. Yes, because these are closed in shapes. So just a quick understanding about how that works. Now, one last thing I want to show you, if I do have this, what happens is if I click on this area, it's still not its own shape because it was all a bunch of lines together that I used the paint bucket for to fill in the color. What I'd want to do is I could expand this, go to Object, select the whole thing, Object, Expand, and now what I've done, expand Object, yes, the fill and the stroke, sure, I'll say okay. And now what I could do, I actually could separate those pieces and it's its own fill. And the bonus with this, the stroke is still intact, okay? So there is that bonus to having that as well. Or if you originally had the idea to keep all your initial drawing together using lines, but also making shapes out of those lines, then that's another way to play around with it. But this way is a great way to have your line work first, playing around with it, and then you're able to go in and use the live paint bucket or live paint selection tool and go in and color it, and then object expand, and then you have your separate shapes as well.